Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. This is going to be the very first of a series of what we're calling CIS Roundtables. We're hoping that we'll be able to have students and members of our educational team and our parent community gather together regularly to talk about issues that matter to us, issues that have come to us from students, come to us from our educators, and come to us from our parents. We wanted to tackle the theme for the whole school that CIS has adopted for this year, which is, as you all know, it's a year to care. We thought it was perhaps really important to begin with what's not so obvious, which is the value, the necessity even, of taking care of ourselves. So it's a complicated subject, and we thought it would be helpful just to get your thoughts.
I think one of the analogies that's often used about self-care and sort of well-being is the oxygen on a plane analogy. So you've all seen being on a plane, and they talk about, if there's something happens and the oxygen masks drop down, parents need to put their own masks on first before they put their children's masks on. And that's because basically you can get hypoxic very quickly, and whereas the child might not be able to look after themselves, the parent can initially. So I think it's a real nice analogy for the idea of it's important for you to care for yourself before you can even think about caring for others. So if you're looking to look after children, you're looking to look after friends, or looking to look after the students in your care, it's really important that you're actually caring for yourself first, because otherwise you don't really have the capacity to do so.
I really appreciate Mr. CS's analogy, and I have similar ones, just like, if you can't love yourself, how can you love other people? I think that's pretty typical, but I feel like our energy, even like the way we treat ourselves, kind of rubs off onto other people. So I believe that if, sometimes when you're in a bad mood and you walk into school, like whoever you're interacting with, you can see that kind of energy rubbing off to people, and that's not like the best version of yourself. So why would you want other people to have that version of you? So in understanding that, I feel like it makes the most sense for us to take care of ourselves, make sure that we're the best version, so then we can actually share that energy with other people.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you.
I think going back to your point of serving the self before you serve others, and basically serving from a place of fullness, because quite often we feel depleted in how we are going about our day, but allowing for that and saying, okay, it's okay, today I won't do that, but maybe I'll be able to help tomorrow. And having that acceptance of oneself, I feel that that's quite important too.
Adelaide, did you want to?
Yeah, just going back to what I think Hyning said a bit earlier and tying it to what you just said, I think it's really important about self-care to kind of just take a step back and kind of evaluate how you're feeling before you kind of move on to focusing on different areas of yourself. For example, I think previous to this discussion, you raised a good point about how we're always making sacrifices when we're trying to think of self-care. And I think self-care is kind of this fundamental thing that we have to have a grasp on before you can move on to kind of improving yourself in regards to academics or other aspects.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a consensus, am I right, around the table that it really is necessary to make it a priority in our lives. But it's not easy. I'm also hearing that it's not an easy thing. What is it that makes it so difficult, do you think? And let's talk about the CIS environment.
I think one of the things that makes it hard is that you care for yourself by self-caring. It's a behaviour, not a knowledge base. So you can know how you should be, but unless you develop the habit, unless you actually do it, you're not caring for yourself. So like anything, it's a habit you need to develop. And so we all know how difficult it is sometimes to establish effective habits in any area of our life. I think that for me is, read about it, know how to do it, but then actually do it, actually care for yourself, make it the most important thing in your day.
I think it's easy for a lot of us to kind of get lost in kind of having and finding the ability and time or the resources, as you just mentioned, to care for yourself when the people you're surrounded with or the environment that you've been brought up with doesn't really focus on that. And I think it's really good that CIS has been focusing so much on this area.
Is it really inevitable that we just sometimes don't have the time?
No matter how much we sort of mitigate our stress or like prioritize self-care, it'll be relative to each person's situation at a time. Like everyone will have different capacities for stress or have different trigger points in their life that create these unfavorable situations. But the important part is always just like finding that balance and creating that extra space for self-care.
Is it permission? You have to give yourself permission for self-care.
I think at times for students it feels that way, and I think like there's something to be said about the glorification of not taking care of yourself as well.
And you were going to say, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think that's really interesting, and I feel so lucky that we're part of this new environment where we are exposed to this. I think even prior to developing habits, we have to have the exposure. I feel like how I see it is like you have to link it to sports, right? Like first time you try swimming, some people might not like it, but then some people grow to be like Olympic swimmers. So I think even with self-care, there's so many, because it's so personal, there's so many different methods that you have to try, like journaling, meditation. And I feel like I made it a priority, especially in, like my teenage years, to see what works for me. With like flexi sessions, we have different options for well-being. And I think that's really interesting to see because students get the agency to do what they feel would make them feel best.
I think that's really good. Sorry. No, that's well said.
I totally agree that like self-care should be so personalized for the individual that's doing it. You can't always standardize everything, but what I really like about the school's approach right now is that we're looking at a sort of a broad scale, looking at fundamental skills, such as like today we were just looking at coping in advisory sessions, and that's not specific to a person, that's for everybody, and then they can find their way from there. And I think going back to the point about prioritization, like sometimes these self-care methods, once you do find out like what works for you, sure, like at times it might not align with the other priorities that you have in your life. But I think one thing that I really appreciate the environment that the school is providing is sort of creating that atmosphere of like sort of vulnerability, in the sense that you're communicating that you're prioritizing yourself in this very moment. And because of that, it allows you to like create that connection with another person. They understand why you're doing this and you're allowed to do that for yourself. That's a crucial point in terms of cultivating an environment of self-care in general.
My son said to me the other day, Dad, I really like breathing. That's great. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that? And I was like, we have the breathing box. It's the visualization of the breathing, and he'd done that in class, and it really stuck with him, and he was really keen to tell us how much he enjoyed it. And I think there is a shift towards those kinds of practices, and educators are really realizing the value of those in the classroom, and students are picking up on them, how it makes them feel. And I think, through initiatives like Visible Wellbeing and the Surge program, we're becoming better practitioners and more confident to try out those techniques at school. So it's real change is occurring.
It sounds like in what you're both saying that we need to help each other in some sense. To develop the habits that you were saying are so important, and that it's hard to do it alone.
Yeah, it's also different to if I were to tell my child to meditate, it doesn't sound the same. But if there are these, wonderful students who are also advocating it, we've got teachers talking about it. It's a normal, regular conversation that's like part of life, like breathing. So.
Are there other thoughts you have, other ideas you have that you think are important for us to consider as a community? Because we're, in some sense, through this conversation, raising awareness.
For me, it's about almost the frameworks for discussing mental health become part of almost every discussion. So I always go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, saying the physical at the bottom, and then the safety and security, and then the self-esteem, and then self-actualization, achieving the potential, and then I guess everything we think about almost has to have that as a focus. What are we doing which supports this? Supports feeling safe at school, supports building self-esteem and capacity, and supports people achieving their potential. keeping the conversations going, making sure we make the connections between mental health and well-being as well. They're inherently connected, and if we're talking about when we are talking about the other, but we need to be explicit about that.
Maybe bringing them home too, because it's great to have a wonderful environment to go to for children, but the reality is sometimes it's hard at home for various reasons, various challenges, life happening, and to be able to have a child bring their situation to school safely, but also feeling that it's okay to do so. There's been a lot of stigma before, and those are breaking quite rapidly actually, which as parents I think we're all very, very thankful for, because it's not easy to know always what is going on. It's very, very informative to hear from children the sorts of things and feelings and thoughts that you may be going through that we weren't aware of, that we haven't encountered before, that even family to family haven't encountered. And those are really important conversations. So coming home as well as at school is quite important, I think.
The main goals were to raise more conversations, and I think right now we're kind of thinking of a new project where we have these kind of lunchtime sessions for people to kind of pop in and talk about their day, and so in that sense people can help each other out. And I think that by having like a centered mental health advocacy group, it's a lot easier for us to share our own experience and therefore like influence other people into being able to open up and kind of show their vulnerable side.
Your work's had little knock-on effects everywhere. Last year you did a board where you asked people to write things down, little sort of motivations and stuff like that. I stole them all at the end. Now they're up in the counselling area, but there's a group of year 7 and 8s who often come to the counselling area corridor at break times, and they're writing more. So like the whole area is getting covered with these little messages. So it's a little trickle effect there.
It sounds like there's a lot of research to support the importance of caring for self, right? But there's also, it seems, a shared sense in our community, led by our students through Peace of Mind, supported by our educational team, our counseling team, our teachers, and by our parents as well, that we believe that it's really important that self-care, self-compassion be a cornerstone for what we're trying to do, because it's helpful to our own health and well-being, as we've been saying, but it also sounds like it allows us, it frees us up, it permits us to be more open, more engaged, more compassionate with others. And in that sense, the knock-on effect, to use a word we heard earlier on, is for the world, is a positive one. Thank you very, very much.